I was picking up my daughter's backpack to wash when I felt something hard in the side pocket. It wasn't like her to keep things there. When I pulled it out, it was a crumpled piece of paper, folded several times, as if someone didn't want it to be seen. My heart raced before I even opened it. I had that strange feeling that something was out of place. The silence in the house grew heavier at that moment. I opened it slowly, without knowing why, as if the paper were going to explode. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike, and the words seemed whispered with fear. "Help me, please. They're hurting me." That hit me like a punch in the gut. I looked again to make sure I'd read it correctly, and there it was, right at the bottom of the page, my daughter's name, Ellie. My body froze. My blood ran cold in my veins, and my breath became shallow. Who are they? I thought, trying to understand. The questions began to multiply faster than I could answer. Was this a cruel joke? Or was my daughter in danger? And I'd never noticed. I hurried to my feet and went to her room. Ellie was drawing on the floor, her colored pencils scattered around her. Her face looked peaceful, but now I saw something I'd never noticed before. A lost look in her eyes, as if she were far away. I knelt down and calmly asked, "Honey, what's this?" She stared at the paper, and the silence lasted an eternity. Then she whispered, "I promised I couldn't tell." That answer tore me apart. Who makes a child promise something like that? What kind of secret could make them so scared? I tried not to sound desperate, but inside, I was in pieces. My mother's instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong, and I knew I had to find out what it was, immediately. Share this story to reach further, subscribe to the channel, share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. I stood up slowly, trying to remain calm, but my head was spinning. I went to my room and closed the door. I grabbed my phone, took a picture of the note, and started looking for help. I needed to understand how to deal with this. I couldn't just confront someone without knowing who they were, but I also couldn't wait. I had to act, and fast. That night, Ellie barely ate dinner. She pushed her food around with her fork, saying nothing. Every time I tried to start a conversation, she looked away. My husband thought it was just fatigue, but I knew better. There was something lurking there, something deeper than an 8-year-old could express. Her silence was deafening. After putting her to bed, I returned to the room with the paper in hand. I read it over and over again 10 more times. My eyes were blurry, my chest tight. As a mother, you blame yourself for everything. How had I not noticed before? Had she been trying to give me signs and I ignored them? I went to Google, researched bullying, abuse, everything that might give me a clue. But the answers frightened me even more. I decided to talk to her teacher the next day. I texted her late at night, asking for a private conversation. She responded within minutes, saying she wanted to talk to me too. That made me even more nervous. What did she know? Why hadn't she contacted me sooner? I lay awake all night, 1,000 scenarios running through my head. On the way to school, Ellie was quiet in the back seat. She kept looking out the window, fidgeting with her shoelaces. When we arrived, I tried to kiss her, but she turned away. It was like a slap in the face. I felt like I was losing my daughter to something invisible and cruel, something I couldn't yet reach. I waited for her to enter and went straight to the teacher's office. As soon as she saw me, Mrs. Thompson closed the door and sighed deeply. "I was just about to call you," she said. "Something's going on with Ellie, and I don't know where to begin." My body tensed. It was as if time had stopped for a few seconds. I could only think one thing. I wasn't imagining it. It was real. And now, with this confirmation, I needed to see it through. No matter what, I would find out, and protect my daughter with everything I had, whatever the cost. Professor Thompson pulled out a chair and asked me to sit. She spoke softly, as if afraid someone would overhear. She began by saying that, in recent weeks, Ellie had been different, quieter, more distant. The drawings she made in class had changed drastically. They were no longer colorful, and now featured dark figures with large eyes and sewn-up mouths. I swallowed hard. The teacher then pulled out a folder with a few sheets. They were Ellie's drawings. One of them chilled me to the bone. It showed a child inside a closet, with hands coming out of the shadows. She said it happened to an imaginary friend, the teacher explained, but it didn't seem like a joke. It was a cry for help from someone who didn't know how to ask for help. Thompson continued, "I asked if she wanted to talk to the school psychologist, but she refused. She said if she said too much, someone would get hurt." My heart sank. I knew this wasn't just a phase. Something, or someone, was terrifying my daughter, and her fear was so great that it made her hide even from words. The teacher then shared something that chilled me. Another student, in the class next door, had also been drawing similar things, but he disappeared from school 2 weeks ago. His parents reported a sudden change. I froze. There was something bigger going on here, something no one was connecting, and it all seemed hidden beneath the calm exterior of that school. I returned home with a sinking feeling in my stomach. I couldn't eat. I couldn't work. All I could think about was what could be happening to my daughter while I thought everything was fine. It was like discovering that the floor in our house was rotten after years of walking on it. The truth was coming to light, but in pieces, and I needed to piece this puzzle together before it was too late. That night, I sat beside Ellie's bed. She pretended to be asleep, but I could see her eyes were wet. I gently took her hand and said, "You can trust me. I'll never let anyone hurt you." She turned to the side, silent, but her fingers gripped mine tightly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next day I went to school early. I spoke to the principal and requested access to the cameras in the children's hallway. I used the security argument, saying something had gone missing from my daughter's backpack. The principal, suspicious, only allowed 2 days of recordings. That was all I needed to get started. I grabbed the flash drive and left trembling. I got home and logged into my laptop. The screen showed the hallway. Children walking by, teachers, everything was normal, until it wasn't. In one part of the video, I saw Ellie standing near the water fountain, alone. A cleaning staff member approached. He looked around, said something, and Ellie lowered her head. They walked out of the camera's view. My heart nearly stopped. I rewound, watched it again and again. This wasn't typical behavior. I went to the school's website and looked up the staff list. No picture of him. I called the school again and discreetly asked who the man in the pictures was. The secretary hesitated. Then she said, "Oh, that's Joe, but he resigned last week." This put me on high alert. I started searching for his name on social media. Nothing. No Joe with that appearance linked to the school. It was as if he didn't exist. I messaged other parents in the class, trying to see if anyone had noticed anything strange. One mother replied, "My daughter also mentioned a guy saying nasty things to her, but I thought he was making it up." That sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly, everything started to connect. The note in my pocket, the drawings, the missing boy, the man without a record. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. And worse, it could be happening to other children. I took a deep breath and decided I wasn't going to act alone anymore. I called the police and asked to file a report. I needed proof, but more than that, I needed to protect my daughter. When I hung up, I looked at Ellie playing in the living room. So small, so innocent. She had no idea of the storm I was weathering for her. But I would do it all again, because now I had a name, and the first thread was already being pulled. That morning, Ellie took longer than usual to get ready. She said she didn't want to go to school, that she had a headache. Her voice was low, almost fading. She avoided my gaze, as if afraid of something that was going to happen there. I knelt in front of her, looked her in the eye, and asked, "Is it because of the paper man?" She froze. She was silent for a few seconds that felt like hours. Then she just shook her head slowly. That shattered me inside. Her fear wasn't imaginary. It was real, a living one, a fear she carried silently, every day. I hugged her tightly, and she began to cry on my shoulder. For the first time, she was allowing herself to feel. I decided she wouldn't go to school that day. I called work and told them I was staying home. Ellie spent the rest of the morning clinging to me, as if afraid something would separate us. While she drew at the kitchen table, I sat down with my laptop trying to find out more about Joe. If I could find him, maybe I could understand what he did. Then a notification appeared. One of the mothers I'd spoken to sent me an audio message. Her daughter said the garbage cart guy had asked her to come into the supply room. He said it was to help put some things away, but she got scared and ran. The mother thought it was a joke, until she heard my story. Now, she was scared too. The police called me that afternoon. They said they would investigate, but without concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. They asked for patience. But how can a mother be patient when she feels her daughter was one step away from danger? I knew I was alone in this, and at that moment, I realized I would have to make difficult decisions. I couldn't wait any longer. That night, I sat in front of the computer for hours, reviewing every second of the videos. I needed to find something that could be used as evidence. And then, in a section of the second video, I noticed something I'd overlooked before. the library camera, reflected in the glass of a door, and in it, the shadow of someone entering where they shouldn't have. I stopped the video, took a screenshot, and enlarged the image. It was the same uniform, the same cleaning cart, and behind it, the silhouette of a child. My heart leaped into my throat. It was Ellie. I ran to her room and hugged her as if it were the last time. I didn't tell her anything. I didn't want to scare her. But then and there, I made the decision that changed everything. I was going to expose it, with or without help. The next day, I went to the police station in person. I showed the image, explained the pattern, and mentioned the other mothers. One of the investigators became visibly more attentive. He took my information and asked me to wait for a new analysis. He said he couldn't promise anything yet, but that the image could open doors. For the first time, I felt a spark of hope. I returned home with my head spinning. What else had that man done? How many children had gone through this and been silenced? What if no one had found the note in my daughter's pocket? The mere thought made me nauseous. I grabbed a notebook and began writing everything down. Dates, conversations, clues. This would become a dossier. I would fight with everything I had. Ellie was calmer that night. She hugged me before bed and whispered, "Mommy, thank you for not letting me go today." It broke my heart. I smiled on the outside, but inside I promised myself no one would ever scare her again. It was time to speak up. It was time to show that when a mother wakes up, nothing can stop her. 2 days later, I received a call from the school. It was the principal. His voice was curter than usual. He wanted to see me urgently. He said there had been a misunderstanding about my complaint. That already sounded like a warning to me. Something was being suppressed. I took a deep breath and went there, certain that they wouldn't intimidate me. Upon arriving, I noticed a strange atmosphere in the hallway. Teachers whispered, glances flickered, doors closed. The principal greeted me with a tense smile and said, "We're investigating internally, but we need you to stop spreading information among parents. It's creating panic." I almost laughed. He was more concerned about the school's image than the children. I replied firmly, "If I hadn't spoken up, my daughter would still be being threatened. You should be thanking me for warning you." His face changed instantly. The smile faded. He blurted out, "If you keep this up, we might take legal action." That was the last straw. I got up from my chair and told him he could try. Because it was war now, I left the school with my blood boiling. I called the mothers group and told them everything. One of them told me that the same principal had already covered up a similar case 2 years earlier, but no one had the courage to follow through. I wasn't going to repeat that mistake. Minutes later, a chain of messages formed in the group. Several mothers began reporting strange behaviors in their children. Late that afternoon, the news broke. One of the mothers was a journalist and posted a detailed article about what was happening. Less than 24 hours later, the school announced it would suspend activities for safety and research. But that wasn't a victory yet. It was just the beginning, because the man in the stroller was still at large, and as long as he was free, danger still lurked. Ellie looked at me differently now, with more trust, as if she knew I was fighting for her, and for all the children who couldn't write a note in time. With the name Joe in hand and the camera footage, the police began digging deeper. They called me to say that the name didn't match any official records. His uniform was from a third-party company, but the company said they'd never had an employee with that profile. It was as if he'd appeared out of nowhere, or worse, had been placed there on purpose. Meanwhile, one of the mothers found an old photo of a school event posted on Facebook. In the background, there he was, a cleaning cart, a low cap, looking away, that same hunched silhouette. The photo was over 6 months old. In other words, he'd been around for a long time, long before the note, long before Ellie. I spent days waking up in the middle of the night. I dreamed of Ellie trapped in that closet in the drawings, hands reaching out from the shadows. It ate at me. I could no longer differentiate between fear and anger. Every time I looked at my daughter, I swore to myself that he would pay, and not just him. Whoever put him there, whoever pretended not to see, whoever covered for him, everyone. The police intensified their search, now with more complaints coming in. A police chief took over the case and called me, saying, "If this man is who we think he is, he's worked at 2 other schools before." That completely chilled me. The pattern was repeating itself, and always with the same outcome: silence, personnel changes, and traumatized children. I carefully showed Ellie the photo. I asked if that was the man. She looked at it, took a deep breath, and said, "Yes, but he had another name." He said his name was Peter. The mistaken identity now made sense. He used different names, changed identities, and disappeared before anyone could act. But this time, he had left a trail. And it was these trails that I would follow until the end. Because now, besides being a mother, I was also a truth hunter. And this story wasn't over yet. At the end of that week, the journalist's story went viral. The story spread across social media. Parent groups from other schools began commenting on similar situations. Photos, screenshots of messages, and videos began to circulate. Suddenly, the story that had been uniquely ours became a national wake-up call. And with that, something incredible happened. The city finally woke up. The police station began receiving complaints every day. Children from other schools also spoke of a cleaning man under different names. The pattern repeated itself, the same method, the same approach. Panic spread, but with it came a safety net. Mothers, fathers, teachers, everyone began to keep a closer eye. The police confirmed the man had used at least 4 identities in the last 3 years, always infiltrating schools, always with false documents. The investigation ended up in the hands of the FBI. The case was now federal. My heart beat in a strange rhythm, between fear and hope, because everything could change at any moment. Ellie started sleeping better. We changed her bed and redecorated her room. She started smiling a little more, but there were still scars. Sometimes she'd wake up in the middle of the night, wide-eyed, begging to sleep with me. I'd tell her everything was going to be okay, and I'd repeat this to both her and myself, because, deep down, I was struggling with fear too. The most beautiful thing was seeing the unity forming. The mothers created a support group. We exchanged advice, information, and silent cries. It was no longer a solitary struggle. It was a chain of protection. And that, in the midst of the chaos, gave me strength, because now it wasn't just about Ellie. It was about all the invisible children who were trying to scream. And even with the pain, even with the weight, I knew I was on the right path, because the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than silence. That Monday, at 6:30 a.m., I got a call. It was the police chief. Her voice was firm, direct. We found him. My heart stopped for a second. Where? I asked. She said he'd been caught trying to get into a new school in another state, using a fake ID. But this time, the photo matched what we'd experienced. He was wearing a different name, a different badge, a different uniform, but the same eyes, the same expression Ellie had drawn. He was arrested in the act, and when confronted with the evidence, he remained silent. The police had more than 10 complaints in hand. The pretrial detention was authorized, and the cycle was finally broken. The nightmare had a face, and now, an end. When I told Ellie, she was silent for a while. Then she asked, "He's not coming back, is he?" I hugged her tightly and said, "No, my love, he's never coming back." She cried silently, a cry of relief, the cry of someone who's carried fear for too long. And I cried with her, because even when we win, we come out wounded. We received visits from social workers, psychologists, and people who wanted to help. Ellie started therapy, so did I, because trauma doesn't disappear with a man's arrest. It needs to heal day by day. But for the first time, we had room to breathe. For the first time, fear gave way to reconstruction, to a new beginning. Most importantly, Ellie never stopped. She became the girl who helps other children, who raises her hand when she sees something wrong, who looks me in the eye and says, "Mommy, now I know I can count on you." That was it. The battle was hard, but my daughter smiled again. Even after the arrest, the days remained burdensome. At first glance, it seemed like everything was resolved, but the pain my daughter carried didn't disappear with the news. She continued to have nightmares. She avoided certain areas of the house. Sometimes, she would suddenly fall silent in the middle of a game. It was as if the fear had taken invisible root. I began to understand that trauma doesn't scream. It whispers when everything seems calm. A slam of a door was enough to put her on alert. A strong smell in the air, and she'd recoil. It was as if everything in her body was still trying to survive. And I learned, the hard way, that protecting isn't just about stopping something from happening. It's about caring for what happens afterward. In my meetings with the therapist, I discovered words I'd never thought of before. Childhood anxiety, post-traumatic stress, fragile trust. But I also learned about resilience, because little by little, Ellie began showing signs of strength I never would have imagined in a child. She started laughing out loud again, drawing happy little animals. In one of these sessions, the psychologist asked us to draw together. Ellie drew a heart with a padlock. I asked what it meant. She said, "It's my heart. It's locked now, but you have the key." I couldn't hold back the tears. Her courage, even broken, was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. My daughter was a warrior. I started writing everything down, every detail, every memory, every conversation. I created a journal for Ellie. She started writing too. Small sentences, confusing but real feelings. It was her way of healing, and my way of ensuring that, even if the world forgot, our story would be recorded. Because ignored pain comes back stronger, and we couldn't allow that anymore. Today, I look at her and see more than a child. I see a survivor, and that taught me more about life than any book, any school, any diploma. My daughter taught me what courage is. A few weeks later, I received a message on Instagram. It was from a mother in another state. She had seen our story and recognized the signs in her own son. He said that thanks to what we shared, he was able to act in time. It gave me goosebumps. It wasn't just about us. Now, it was about everyone waking up. I created a page. They won't shut up anymore. Within 2 days, I had over 20,000 followers. Parents, teachers, even teenagers writing messages. People who finally felt comfortable speaking what was stuck in their throats. It was as if each story were a piece of the puzzle. And now, the whole picture was beginning to emerge. I was called for an interview on local TV. I spoke with a shaky but firm voice. He said no one prepares us for this, that being a mother is like carrying an invisible sword every day, but we can't remain silent, that school has to be the safest place in the world, and that we need to stop distrusting children. They always tell the truth, in their own way. After that, invitations to speak came pouring in. I began helping develop protocols in public schools. I trained teachers to identify signs. All I wanted was for no one else to go through what we had. I couldn't erase the past, but I could use it as a shield for the future, and that gave me purpose. Ellie saw me on TV and smiled. "You've become a hero, Mommy." But what she doesn't know is that she was the real hero of the story, because it was the note hidden in her pocket that changed everything. It was her courage to ask for help, even when she was afraid, that turned the tide. And now, that note has become a symbol, a warning, a cry for freedom, and the chain keeps growing. Because every time someone shares, comments, listens, another child is saved from silence. Every now and then I find that note, kept in a small wooden box, wrapped in tissue paper. It's crumpled, stained with time, but it still beats with the same strength. Every time I read it, my heart races again. But now, for a different reason, gratitude. That piece of paper saved my daughter, and perhaps many others. It wasn't just a message. It was a muffled scream that pierced through the fear. It was the bravest act a child could ever do. I considered having it framed. Then I realized it needed to remain as it was. Imperfect, real, strong. Because pain doesn't have to be pretty to be powerful, and memory can't be disguised. I show my ticket at some of the lectures I give, always with the same care. And every time, someone in the audience cries. Sometimes a mother, sometimes a father, sometimes a professor who realizes they've seen something similar before and ignored it. The reaction is always the same, a heavy silence. And then, a wave of empathy that takes over the room. There, it's not just my story that resonates. It's the story of many children who never had the courage to write a note, of many parents who never saw the signs, and of many guilty people who went unpunished for years, but no longer. Fear has changed sides, because someone who knew silence decided to speak, and the world finally listened. On the last night before the new school year, Ellie called me into her room. She said she wanted to take the note with her, to remind her that she was strong, that nothing could hurt her again. I said yes, but on one condition, that she never again carry heavy secrets alone, and she promised, with that look in her eyes, of someone who'd learned more in a year than many learn in a lifetime. Because in the end, what changed everything was a child's courage and a mother's decision to listen. If someone were to ask me what I've learned most from all this, I'd say that silence is childhood's greatest enemy, that we shouldn't ignore the signs, and that, no matter how difficult it may seem, the truth always finds a way to appear, sometimes in the form of a drawing, sometimes in a look, sometimes on a folded piece of paper in a pocket too small for its weight. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Ellie taught me this without words, only with gestures, with silences gradually broken, with looks that asked for help, and with the strength of someone who, even fragile, decided to trust. And this made me rethink everything, my way of being a mother, of listening, of being present. I also realized how much our society needs to evolve, how easy it still is to hide evil behind uniforms and positions, how much schools need to be trained, not only to teach, but to protect. We can no longer think that security is just cameras and locked gates. Security is looking people in the eye. It's genuinely asking questions. It's listening without judgment. But above all, I learned about love. A love that accepts no excuses, that faces everything, even without knowing how it will end. A love that trembles but doesn't retreat, that cries but carries on, that fights with the weapons it has, until the end. Being a mother made me a warrior, and my daughter, even without knowing it, made me invincible. Today, we move forward, with scars, yes, but with purpose, with scars that tell stories, and with the certainty that no other child will go through this if it were up to me. Because now, I am a voice, and more than that, I am a shield. If you've made it this far, share this story. Send it to a mother, a father, a teacher. It could save a life. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment where you're watching. I'll read each one with care, and never forget, children need to be heard, always.